My grandson said I was just some old woman. Then he saw my picture hanging in his dream school. The words came through the baby monitor at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. I know the time because I just finished my tea and was about to turn the thing off when I heard my grandson Tyler's voice, sharp and cruel in a way that made my hand freeze on the switch. He was 17 years old, tall and confident in the way teenage boys get when they think the world owes them something. And apparently, what he thought the world owed him didn't include respect for his grandmother. "Dude, I'm serious," Tyler said, and I could hear the laughter in his voice, that particular brand of mockery that teenagers perfect. "My mom is making me bring her to the campus tour. Can you believe it? Some old woman who doesn't even understand how college works anymore. She went to school like 100 years ago. She's probably going to embarrass me in front of everyone." His friend said something I couldn't quite hear, and then Tyler laughed again. "Yeah, exactly. She's just this old lady who lives in our guest house and bakes cookies. That's literally all she does. I don't even know why Mom insists she has to come. It's my future, not hers." I sat there in my small guest house apartment behind my daughter Rebecca's main house, holding that baby monitor that Rebecca had installed so I could hear if my other grandson, little Marcus, needed anything during his naps. The monitor that had just broadcast my own grandson's contempt for me like a radio show I never wanted to hear. My hands were shaking, but not from age, from something that felt like ice water running through my veins. Some old woman just bakes cookies. That's all she does. I looked around my small living room at the life I'd built in this 400 square foot space. The simple furniture, the small kitchenette, the photographs on the wall that nobody ever asked about, including the one photograph I'd hidden in my closet 3 years ago, because every time Rebecca saw it, she'd get that uncomfortable look on her face and change the subject. The photograph of me at 28 years old, standing in front of Whitmore University's School of Architecture, holding the award that changed everything. Let me tell you something about being 73 years old and invisible. It happens gradually, like fog rolling in. First, people stop asking your opinion. Then they stop listening when you give it anyway. Then they stop seeing you as a person who once had dreams and achievements and a life that mattered. You become a collection of age spots in gray hair and outdated opinions. You become someone's grandmother, someone's mother, someone's elderly relative who needs to be managed and accommodated and apparently hidden away during important events. But here's what Tyler didn't know. Here's what nobody in my family knew anymore because I'd gotten tired of making them uncomfortable with my past. Kelly Roberts, the old woman who just bakes cookies, wasn't always old, and she wasn't always just a grandmother. 50 years ago, Kelly Roberts was Kelly Whitmore, and Kelly Whitmore changed the face of sustainable architecture in America. If you're wondering why I'm telling you this story, it's because I want you to understand something. I want you to know what happens when you treat people like they're invisible. When you reduce someone's entire existence to what they do for you right now, in this moment, without caring about who they were or what they've done or what they've sacrificed. And if you've ever been made to feel invisible by your own family, if you've ever been called just some old woman or just some old man, then maybe you'll understand why I did what I did next. Hit that like button if you've ever felt unseen, and subscribe because this story is about to get very interesting. The campus tour was scheduled for the following Thursday. Whitmore University, the same college that Tyler had been obsessing over for 2 years. His dream school, he called it. The school with the best architecture program in the state, the school that would launch his career, the school that would make him somebody. I'd listened to him talk about it at family dinners, watched him research it endlessly, heard him tell anyone who would listen that Whitmore was his destiny. And the whole time, my daughter Rebecca would smile and nod and say how wonderful it would be, and not once did anyone think to ask me about Whitmore. Not once did anyone remember that I had any connection to it at all. Wednesday night, I made my decision. I pulled out the photograph from my closet, the one I'd hidden away. Me at 28, my dark hair pulled back, wearing the suit I'd saved 6 months to buy, standing in front of the Whitmore Architecture Building with the Whitmore Innovation Award in my hands. Behind me in the photograph, you could see the building itself, the one I'd designed as my graduate thesis, the one that became my first real achievement. The building that still stood on that campus, though I hadn't seen it in person in almost 15 years. I also pulled out my old briefcase, the leather one that had traveled with me to dozens of conferences and presentations. Inside were things I'd kept, things I'd saved, because some part of me knew that one day I might need to prove that I existed, that I mattered, that I was more than just someone's grandmother. Awards, newspaper clippings, magazine features, letters from universities and firms, photographs of buildings I designed. 50 years of a career that nobody wanted to hear about because it made them uncomfortable to think of Grandma as someone who once had power and influence and respect. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you remember being young. Rebecca knocked on my guesthouse door at 8:30, right on schedule, her face already tight with stress. She was 49 years old, my only daughter, and she'd inherited my organizational skills but none of my backbone. She managed a dental office and did it well, but she'd never learned how to stand up to her own son, never learned how to tell Tyler no when he needed to hear it. "Mom, are you ready?" she asked, glancing at her watch. "Tyler wants to leave by 9 so we can get there early. He's really excited about this." She paused, then added in a lower voice, "And please, just, let him take the lead today, okay? This is really important to him." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised while building a career that most people said was impossible for a woman to have. I juggled late-night feedings and early morning site visits, had brought her to my office in a playpen when I couldn't find childcare, had shown her that women could be anything they wanted to be. And somehow, she'd grown up to be someone who asked me to make myself smaller so her son wouldn't be uncomfortable. "I'm ready," I said simply, picking up my purse. Inside that purse was everything I needed. Not just my wallet and my phone, but also a thin folder containing copies of those documents from my briefcase. Insurance, you might call it. Proof that Kelly Roberts had once been someone worth remembering. The drive to Whitmore University took an hour and 40 minutes. Tyler sat in the front next to Rebecca, his phone in his hand, texting his friends about the tour. I sat in the back seat, invisible, watching the landscape change from urban to suburb to the rolling hills that surrounded the university town. Nobody asked me if I was comfortable. Nobody asked me if I needed anything. Nobody asked me anything at all. Tyler spent most of the drive talking about his plans, how he was going to get into Whitmore's architecture program, how he was going to become a famous architect, how he was going to design buildings that would change the world. His voice was bright with confidence, that unearned confidence that comes from being 17. And having never failed at anything important, Rebecca made encouraging noises, asked him questions about his portfolio, told him how proud she was, and I sat in the back seat and listened to my grandson plan the future I'd already lived. We arrived at Whitmore at 10:45, 15 minutes early for the tour. The campus had changed in some ways since I'd last seen it, new buildings added, old ones renovated, but the core of it was the same, those red brick buildings with white trim that had defined Northeastern University architecture for generations. And there, at the heart of campus, visible as we drove through the main gates, was my building, the Whitmore Center for Sustainable Design, though it hadn't been called that when I designed it. Back then, it was just the new architecture building, revolutionary in its use of passive solar heating and natural cooling systems, features that were considered experimental in 1974 and are now standard in every green building in the country. The building looked exactly as I'd intended it to look 50 years ago. 3 stories of brick and glass, positioned to maximize southern exposure, with a roof garden that was invisible from the street, but provided insulation and beauty to those inside. It had won awards, that building. It had been featured in architecture magazines. It had been the reason firms started taking me seriously, the reason I got invited to conferences, the reason my career became something real instead of just something I was trying to make happen. And my grandson was about to walk past it without knowing that his grandmother had designed it. We parked in the visitor lot and walked toward the admissions building where the tour was supposed to begin. Tyler walked ahead of us, his shoulders back, trying to look like he belonged there already. Rebecca walked beside me, checking her phone, making sure we weren't late. And I walked slowly, taking in everything, remembering what it felt like to be 28 years old and seeing this campus as a place where I belonged, where my ideas mattered, where my voice was heard. The tour group gathered in front of the admissions building at exactly 11 o'clock. There were about 15 families, all with that same expression of hope and anxiety that comes with college tours. Tyler immediately positioned himself at the front of the group, eager to show he was serious, that he wasn't just some tourist. Rebecca stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder in that proud mother way, and I stood at the back, where old women are supposed to stand, out of the way, invisible. Our tour guide was a perky junior named Madison, who wore a Whitmore sweatshirt and had clearly given this tour 100 times. She had that practiced enthusiasm that tour guides perfect, that ability to make every fact sound exciting even when it's not. She started with the basics, the founding of the university in 1893, the number of students, the student-to-faculty ratio, all the information that's in every brochure, but somehow sounds more official when someone says it out loud. We walked through campus in a neat little group, Madison pointing out various buildings and features. The library, expanded in 2008. The Student Center, renovated in 2015. The dormitories, a mix of historic and modern. Tyler was taking notes on his phone, photographing everything, asking questions about the architecture program. His questions were good questions, I had to admit. Questions about design philosophy, about faculty specializations, about internship opportunities. Questions that showed he'd done his research. And then we turned a corner, and there it was. My building, the Whitmore Center for Sustainable Design, standing exactly where I'd designed it to stand, positioned to catch the afternoon light in a way that reduced heating costs by 40%. Madison stopped in front of it, and I felt my heart start to race. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I'd known was coming since I decided to come on this tour. "This is one of our most significant buildings," Madison said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "The Whitmore Center for Sustainable Design, built in 1975. It was actually designed by a woman, which was incredibly rare at that time. Her name was Kelly Whitmore, and she was a graduate student here. This building was her thesis project, and it was so revolutionary that the university decided to actually build it. It became one of the first examples of passive solar design in educational architecture in the United States." I watched Tyler's face. He was interested now, actually paying attention in a way he hadn't been for the other buildings. Architecture students always care more when you tell them something was revolutionary. Madison continued, warming to her subject. Kelly Whitmore went on to become one of the most influential sustainable architects of the 1970s and 80s. She designed over 30 major buildings before she retired. The university is really proud of this building because it represents what Whitmore stands for: innovation, sustainability, and giving opportunities to talented people regardless of gender. There's actually a whole exhibit about her inside. Her photograph is in the main lobby, along with some of her original design sketches. "Can we go inside?" Tyler asked, and there was real excitement in his voice now. "Absolutely," Madison said. "This is actually my favorite part of the tour." We walked into the building, into the lobby I'd designed to be flooded with natural light from the south-facing windows. And there, on the wall, exactly where Madison had said it would be, was the photograph. Not the one from my closet, but a similar one from the same period. Me at 28, young and serious, holding my award. Below it was a plaque with my name and a brief description of my achievements. "Kelly Whitmore, Pioneer of Sustainable Architecture," it read. And next to that photograph were two of my original sketches, framed behind glass, showing the building's innovative heating and cooling systems. Tyler walked up to the display, Rebecca beside him. I hung back, watching them look at the photograph of me, at the sketches I'd drawn 50 years ago. I watched Tyler read the plaque, his lips moving slightly as he processed the information. I watched Rebecca lean in closer, squinting at the photograph, and I saw the exact moment when recognition hit her face. "Mom?" Rebecca said quietly, turning to look back at me. "Mom, is this you?" The whole tour group turned to look at me. Madison turned to look at me. And Tyler, my grandson who'd called me just some old woman, turned to look at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Something between shock and disbelief and embarrassment. "Yes," I said simply. "That's me. I designed this building when I was 28 years old." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that feels loud. Madison's mouth had fallen open slightly. The other families on the tour were looking back and forth between me and the photograph on the wall, trying to reconcile the old woman in the sensible shoes with the young woman in the professional photograph. Tyler's face had gone red. That particular shade of red that comes from humiliation, from realizing you've made a terrible mistake in front of people you were trying to impress. "You?" Tyler started, his voice coming out strained. "You're Kelly Whitmore?" I said calmly. "I changed my name to Roberts when I got married. But yes, that's me. This is my building." Madison had recovered from her surprise and was now looking at me with something like awe. "Oh my God," she said. "Oh my God, you're actually here. This is incredible. We studied your work in my architectural history class. Your designs influenced an entire generation of sustainable architecture." I smiled at her. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind of you to say." Rebecca moved closer to me, her face pale. She was clearly trying to process this, trying to understand how she'd lived 49 years without really knowing what her mother had accomplished. "Mom," she said quietly, "why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell Tyler?" "I tried," I said, and my voice was gentle, because Rebecca wasn't the villain here, not really. She was just someone who'd stopped listening somewhere along the way. Many times. But people get uncomfortable when old women talk about the past. They think we're bragging or living in the past or trying to make everything about us. So eventually, I stopped trying. Tyler was still staring at the photograph on the wall. He looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. One of the other mothers in the tour group, a woman about Rebecca's age, was looking at Tyler with an expression that made it clear she'd heard his earlier comments about me. That look of judgment, that look that said she knew exactly what kind of grandson he'd been. Madison, bless her, was trying to turn this into a positive moment. "This is so amazing," she said. "Would you be willing to talk about the building, about your design process? We have prospective architecture students here, and this would be such an incredible opportunity for them." And here was my moment. My moment to be gracious, to be the bigger person, to make this easy for Tyler. But I looked at my grandson, at his red face and his shocked expression, and I thought about all the times I'd made myself smaller for someone else's comfort. All the times I'd let my achievements be forgotten because it was easier than making people uncomfortable. All the times I'd been just some old woman instead of Kelly Whitmore, pioneer of sustainable architecture. "I'd be happy to," I said. For the next 45 minutes, I talked about the building. I explained the passive solar design, how the positioning of the windows captured winter sun for heating but blocked summer sun to reduce cooling costs. I explained the thermal mass in the floors that stored heat during the day and released it at night. I explained the natural ventilation system that drew cool air from the north side and expelled warm air through the roof monitors. I showed them the original sketches on the wall and explained my thought process, how I'd challenged every assumption about how buildings had to work. The prospective students asked questions, good questions, and I answered them. I talked about being a woman in architecture in the 1970s, about the firms that wouldn't hire me, about the professors who told me I should consider a different career. I talked about persistence and innovation and refusing to accept that something was impossible just because it hadn't been done before. Tyler didn't ask any questions. He stood at the back of the group now, in the space where I'd stood earlier, and he watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shame? Definitely. Embarrassment? Certainly. But maybe something else, too. Maybe the first stirrings of understanding that the people around you have entire lives and histories that you know nothing about. Rebecca was crying quietly, not big, dramatic tears, just small tears sliding down her cheeks that she kept wiping away with her fingers. I think she was realizing how much she'd never asked me, how much she'd assumed she knew about my life without ever really listening. When I finished talking, Madison started clapping, and the rest of the tour group joined in. It was awkward applause, the kind that happens when people don't know what else to do but feel like something should be acknowledged. But it was also genuine. These people had just learned something, not just about sustainable architecture, but about assumptions and respect and the value of listening to the elderly. "Thank you so much," Madison said, and she looked like she meant it. "That was incredible. Would you be willing to sign something for me? I have my architecture history textbook in my bag, and you're in it, and it would mean so much to me." "Of course," I said. After the tour ended, after I'd signed Madison's textbook and posed for selfies with 3 different prospective architecture students, after the other families had drifted away with new looks of respect on their faces, it was just me, Rebecca, and Tyler standing in the lobby of my building. Tyler approached me slowly, like he was approaching a stranger. "Grandma," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. I didn't know about any of this." "You didn't ask," I said simply. "I'm sorry," he said, and to his credit, he looked like he meant it. "I'm really sorry. The things I said, on the phone, I didn't mean them. I was being stupid." "You were being cruel," I corrected him. "There's a difference. Stupid is accidental. What you said was deliberate." He flinched. "You heard that?" "The baby monitor," Rebecca said quietly, "for Marcus. It was on." Tyler closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize that I was a person," I said. "You didn't realize that I had a life before I was your grandmother. You saw me as just some old woman who bakes cookies, and you were embarrassed by that. You were embarrassed by me." I was wrong, he said, and now he was crying too. 17-year-old boys don't like to cry in public, but sometimes the magnitude of a mistake is too big to hold inside. "I was so wrong. I'm sorry." I looked at my grandson, this boy who'd hurt me, who'd dismissed me, who'd made me feel invisible in my own family. And I thought about all the times I'd chosen grace over justice, all the times I'd let things go to keep the peace. But I also thought about something else. I thought about the fact that Tyler was 17 years old, the same age I'd been when I'd first decided I wanted to be an architect, the same age I'd been when everyone told me it was impossible. "Tyler," I said, "let me tell you something about architecture, about real architecture, not just the buildings themselves, but the philosophy behind them. The best buildings are the ones that work with their environment instead of against it. They don't try to dominate or control, they observe, they adapt, they find elegant solutions to complex problems. And the best architects are the ones who listen more than they speak, who learn from everyone around them, who understand that every person they meet knows something they don't." He was listening now, really listening, in a way he probably hadn't listened to me in years. "You want to go to Whitmore," I continued. "You want to be an architect. Those are good goals. But if you're going to achieve them, you need to learn something important right now. You need to learn that people aren't just what they appear to be in this moment. Your teachers have lives outside the classroom. The janitor in your school has a history you know nothing about. That homeless person on the corner downtown might have been a professor, or a soldier, or a parent, or all 3. And that old woman in your guest house, the one who just bakes cookies, she might have changed the entire field of sustainable architecture in America." "I understand," Tyler said quietly. "I really do understand now." "I hope so," I said. "Because here's the thing, Tyler. I'm not going to stand in the way of your dreams. I'm not going to sabotage your application to Whitmore or make your life difficult because you hurt me. But I am going to remember what you said, and how you saw me, and how little you valued my presence in your life. And you're going to have to live with that too. You're going to have to live with knowing that you called your grandmother, a woman who pioneered sustainable architecture, just some old woman who doesn't understand how college works." He nodded, tears still streaming down his face. Rebecca stepped forward. "Mom, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I never asked more about your career. I'm sorry I made you feel like your past didn't matter. I guess I just always thought of you as my mom, and I never really thought about who you were before that. Most children don't, I said. It's natural, but it's also something you need to work on, because I won't always be here, Rebecca. And when I'm gone, you're going to wish you'd asked more questions. You're going to wish you'd listened to more stories. We drove home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the drive there. It was the silence of people processing, of people realizing things they should have realized a long time ago. That evening, Tyler knocked on my guest house door. He was holding his laptop. "Grandma," he said, "can I come in? I want to learn about your work, all of it. I've been researching, and I found articles and photographs, and I want to know everything." I let him in, and for the next 3 hours, we sat at my small table, and I showed him my briefcase full of memories. I showed him photographs of buildings I designed, buildings all over the country that were still standing, still functioning, still serving the purposes I'd designed them for. I showed him awards and magazine features and letters from other architects telling me that my work had inspired them. "You changed everything," Tyler said, looking at a magazine from 1982 that featured one of my office buildings in Seattle. "You actually changed the entire field." "I contributed," I said, along with many others. "But yes, I made a difference." "Why did you stop?" he asked. "Why did you retire?" I smiled. "Because I was tired, Tyler. Because I'd worked for 45 years, and I wanted to spend time with my grandchildren. I wanted to bake cookies and tend my garden and read books, and not have to fight for respect every single day. Being a woman in architecture, it was exhausting. Every project was a battle. Every meeting was a challenge. Every design had to be twice as good as a man's to be taken seriously. And eventually, I'd proven everything I needed to prove, and I was ready to rest." "But we made you invisible," he said, quietly. "Yes," I agreed, "you did. But that's not entirely your fault. Society makes old people invisible, especially old women. We become obsolete in people's eyes, like outdated technology. But the truth is, we're not obsolete. We're just tired of fighting to be seen." Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to do better, I promise. I'm going to ask questions, I'm going to listen, I'm going to treat you like the person you are, not just like my grandmother." "I'd like that," I said. Over the next few weeks, things changed in my family. Rebecca started coming to my guest house in the evenings, asking me about my life, about my career, about the choices I'd made. She brought a notebook and took notes, like she was documenting something important. Tyler started eating lunch with me twice a week, bringing his architecture homework, asking my opinion on his designs. He listened when I gave him feedback. He made changes based on my suggestions. He started introducing me to his friends, not as his grandmother, but as Kelly Roberts, the architect. And slowly, I started to feel seen again. Not just as someone's mother or someone's grandmother, but as Kelly Whitmore, the woman who designed buildings that changed the way people thought about sustainable architecture. 3 months after the campus tour, Tyler received his acceptance letter from Whitmore University. He ran to my guest house to tell me, his face bright with joy. "I got in, Grandma," he said. "I got into the architecture program." "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. "You worked hard for this." "The essay," he said. "I wrote my application essay about you, about learning that my grandmother was Kelly Whitmore, about realizing that I'd been living next to a legend and treating her like she was invisible, about understanding that everyone around us has stories we don't know, achievements we haven't asked about, histories that matter." I felt tears pricking my eyes. "You wrote about me?" "I wrote about learning to see people," he said. "About understanding that respect isn't just for people who seem important right now, but for everyone. Because everyone was important to someone. Everyone achieved something. Everyone matters." The admissions counselor told me it was one of the most thoughtful essays she'd read all year. We hugged then, my grandson and I, and it felt different than it had before. It felt like he was seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. Tyler starts at Whitmore this fall. He's already planning to take every class in sustainable design. He wants to carry on the work I started, to push it further, to find new ways to make buildings that work with the environment instead of against it. And he's asked me to come to campus with him on his first day, to show him around, to introduce him to the building I designed. I said yes, of course. How could I say no? But more than that, more than Tyler's acceptance or his newfound respect or his plans for the future, what matters to me is this. I'm not invisible anymore. Not in my own family, not in my own home. My daughter asks about my past now, regularly, like she's trying to make up for lost time. My grandson treats me like a mentor, like someone whose opinion matters, whose experience is valuable. And I've learned something too. I've learned that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. You have to remind people that you exist, that you matter, that your life has value beyond what you do for them right now. Because the alternative is to fade away quietly, to become just some old woman, to let your achievements and your history be forgotten. I'm 73 years old. I designed over 30 buildings that are still standing. I pioneered sustainable architecture techniques that are now standard practice. I fought for respect in a field that didn't want to give it to me, and I won. And I'm not going to let anyone, not even my own family, reduce me to just some old woman. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been dismissed because of your age or your gender or anything else that people decided made you less valuable, I want you to know something. You matter. Your history matters. Your achievements matter. And you have the right to be seen and heard and respected no matter how old you are or how much time has passed since your glory days. Don't let anyone make you invisible. Don't let anyone reduce you to just one thing, to just one role. You are more than someone's parent or grandparent. You are more than your age. You are the sum of everything you've done and been and achieved, and that deserves to be remembered. My name is Kelly Roberts. I was Kelly Whitmore. I changed sustainable architecture in America, and I'm not just some old woman who bakes cookies. Though I do make excellent chocolate chip cookies, if anyone's interested. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt unseen or undervalued, please subscribe to hear more stories about standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be invisible. Drop a comment below sharing a time when someone underestimated you because of your age. Let's remind each other that we all have stories worth telling, achievements worth remembering, and lives that matter. And please, please hit that like button if you believe that respect isn't just for the young and the currently successful, but for everyone who's ever fought for something, achieved something, or simply survived something worth surviving. We all deserve to be seen. We all deserve to be heard. And we all deserve to be remembered for more than just what we do for other people, right now, in this moment. Thank you for seeing me, thank you for hearing me, and thank you for remembering that behind every old woman bakes cookies, there might just be a legend waiting to be rediscovered.